encourage your soul, enlighten your mind, and empower your faith. This is the Light Network.
You know what time it is, no matter where you've been. So let's do it again. Listen up and let the sun shine in. We've got soul training. Time to practice what you preach. Ooh, yeah. Yes, we do. We've got soul training.
And here's Daniel, Alan, and Joe.
Hey, Daniel, what brings you peace?
When I think about peaceful times, I think about being out in nature. I think about watching a sunset or looking over the water at the beach or looking at the mountains or just being out in the forest.
What about you, Joe? What brings you peace?
Yeah, those things Daniel's talking about. Also, sometimes being with my family is peaceful. Sometimes it's not. But sometimes, you have that perfect afternoon with everybody. Maybe you've gone out to dinner. You're driving home. It's just, peaceful.
Yeah, or like this morning, looking out over the new fallen snow coming down. Something about fresh snow feels peaceful.
Yeah.
Pure.
What about you, Alan?
Well, I'm going to springboard off something you all say, or have said rather. But when I think of peace, I think of all those things. The older I get, the more I like dark rooms. They pick at me at home. I'll walk through if nobody's really watching the TV, and I'll just grab the remote and turn it off because I like just serenity, quietness. This is kind of funny, but a few years ago, you mentioned that perfect, time with your family. We were at my in-laws' house one afternoon. It was around Christmas time, but it was cold and snowy, and my father-in-law, all the grandkids like popcorn, and it was just me and my wife and my two children and the other 6 grandkids, and other people were not there. So we sat down and had popcorn, and we watched an hour-long documentary on public broadcasting about monks. And I'm telling you, we were engaged. It was peaceful. I learned about the life of a monk, and that seemed just peaceful to me, so that sticks out in my time as a peaceful time, learning about monks.
That reminds me, do you know how to get into a monastery?
Oh, wait, now let me think.
No, we don't.
No, go ahead. I'm going to give up.
You got to use a monkey.
Well, see, I'm thankful that he was able to get me out of that. Yeah. He did. Thank you, Daniel, for doing that. But we'll move on quickly. And peace, as you can already see, is something that we're going to talk about. And really, I don't know, Joe, I don't want to jump ahead because I know you kind of handle the titling of each episode. But we're going to talk about the peace that passes all understanding. When I hear that phrase, I think it's in a song maybe we sing, but if we don't, the peace is so great it's hard for us to understand it, but hopefully we can embrace it and enjoy it. So we're going to talk about the peace that passes all understanding. So I have some notes and questions I'll ask after you all get started. But
first of all, I'm trying to bring the passage up.
It's Philippians 4:7. The peace of God, which surpasses all understanding or all comprehension, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus.
Yep.
So that's what we're talking about here. This sounds pretty good. The peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Peace of God. I'd like to have that peace of God.
Sure.
So what I wanted to do today was, if the Bible talks about this peace that surpasses understanding, seems like a good thing that we should want. What is it, first of all, and then how do we obtain that? And so, Daniel, you had, like always, Daniel had done a sermon on this at some point that touched on this. And so I'm just going to hand it off to you, but I like the way you've titled your sermon. So maybe that's what we need to focus more on is our minds. The title of Daniel's sermon is The Mind of a Christian.
Yeah, the mind of a Christian. And we just went through Philippians chapter 4 here, and centering around that idea of the peace of God which passes all understanding. Yeah, I guess let me start with the conclusion. Alan's always talking about beginning with the end in mind. This is what I always say about the peace that passes understanding. In order to gain the peace that passes understanding, you have to forfeit your right to understanding. There's so many times people are agonizing and wrestling with something. Maybe it's suffering, for example, whatever it is that's stealing your peace. And you're asking, why? I don't see any good that could possibly come out of this. Why? And they want to understand so desperately.
What did you say about understand? I'm going to write that down.
In order to gain the peace that passes understanding, you have to forfeit your right to understanding. Okay. There has to come that point where you quit struggling to understand and you just trust God. You're like, I understand. No, I don't understand. I don't understand. I'm not going to understand. Like in the book of Job, through that story of Job, I hate to assume that our listeners know the story, but I'm going to basically assume you do, at least that Job was a guy that was severely tested. He went through a lot of trials and tribulations.
He lost everything. Super rich guy in the Old Testament, lost his family, lost his wealth, lost his health, everything.
Exactly.
You could almost think about and I know we talked about not dating things, but the LA fires that's happening right now. People losing everything.
People losing everything. But the thing about Job's story is, at least within the context of the book, as far as we know, he never gets to know why. He does get to talk to God at the end of the book, but kind of the message is you just got to trust that God's got this and that he knows what he's doing. Well, that's where our peace can come from, is when we have that mind of a Christian that is able to trust God enough to where we've had enough experience with him, we believe in him, we trust him, that even though I don't see why this situation has to be, I don't understand it, I'm going to quit trying to understand it and trust he's got it. I don't have to get it because he's got it.
Well, could that be looked at as just burying your head in the sand, though, and just forget it? I'm not going to be aware of anything. I'm just trusting God for everything.
Well, it could if you didn't have any reason to trust. I'm not saying that somebody should just completely blindly trust God. Our faith in God is well grounded. There's lots of evidence for our faith in God, and this is a point that we grow to as a mature Christian. You've had your faith working and growing for quite a while. You're not just suddenly throwing up your hands, but you're learning to trust. And people really struggle with the idea of trust a lot. There's a popular expression, a Reagan expression, trust but verify. Right?
I use that all the time.
Sure, trust but verify. Well, that's practical, but it's also nonsensical. Verification is necessary because of some bit of doubt, right? If you completely trusted in something, why would you need to verify it? Why would you want to verify it? You trust it. That's a waste of your time.
So really you don't trust.
Really you don't trust. Yeah. You're saying, I mostly trust, but I need just a little bit to make sure. Well, if we're going to have full peace, and we might use that Hebrew word shalom, which is a more full idea of peace.
And this is the word you hear in movies or The Chosen or something. They say it like 1 billion times. When somebody walks in a room, somebody leaves a room, they see somebody across the street.
Yes.
Shalom, all the time.
All the time. It's a greeting, it's a well wish, and it it means peace, but it's more than peace. It's a wholeness, it's a completeness, it's a harmony, it's a fuller idea of peace than it's that absence of striving, but kind of across your life. And now I've forgotten where I was going with that. But
well, you had mentioned Job a while back. Did we ever get
yeah, we did. We got to the point with Job that Job never got to know why he was going through the things he was going through. He just had to learn to trust God.
Well, going down through some of your notes here, you've come to anxiety,
Okay.
and we've had episodes on mental health or anxiety, depression, things like that. And those are in our, before, Alan, before you came up here, Daniel and I were talking, it's a different world than it was whenever we were kids. Mental health wasn't really a thing whenever we were kids. I didn't know anything about it anyhow. Nobody ever said anything about it. But now I've got young kids. Daniel's got young kids. I bet all of them have heard the phrase anxiety, depression, and other mental health, which is not necessarily a bad thing. That's a good thing that they're aware of this. But here you're talking about being anxiety being a thief of our shalom.
It is, and the reason this comes up is because it's in the text we're dealing with. We back up. We read verse 7. Let's back up to verse 4 and get a fuller context there. It says, "Rejoice in the Lord always." Again, I will say rejoice. "Let your gentle spirit be known to all men. The Lord is near." Verse 6, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God." Now, when we're talking about anxiety here, let's not confuse it with the clinical term. We're not talking really about a mental health kind of situation more than we are a less formal...
Daily worries?
Daily worries, yeah, the things that make us anxious. And really, I don't know, extrapolate it as far as you want to. I think it could be helpful. Prayer definitely can be helpful in dealing with any kind of ailment, mental or otherwise. But
when you say prayer is surrender, I mean you are trusting. I mean I'm just asking. But I think prayer is definitely not. It's surrender, but it's also seeking. It
is. And well, I'll mention the reason that helps in just a second, but the reason anxiety is a thief of our peace is it directs our focus to the wrong things. When we're filled with anxiety, we're thinking about all the things that could go wrong. We're all thinking about all the things that have gone wrong. We're, somebody said, I forget the expression, but worry is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere.
Gotcha.
And anxiety is a bit
That's
like
powerful.
that. Yeah. So you're worried about all these things that could go wrong. Now somebody else says, 99% of the things that I worry about don't happen, so that proves that worrying works. But like you were mentioning in prayer, the key to restoring peace is to find a way to put the weight of our burdens onto God's shoulders rather than our own, because our own just are not strong enough for the significant burdens that we might face. But to do that requires that we have to be willing to give up control, which is a deal breaker for a lot of people. That's what that's what a lack of faith really is I've got to hang on to control. And when we release that control to God, instead of feeling like I have to have it, that paves the way for us to be able to have that peace that passes understanding. Because I don't have to understand it. I don't have to control it.
Okay. Alan, you have some sort of action figure in front of you. You want to talk about what this is? Alan's bringing his toys to recordings now, apparently.
Well, you said that it's a safe place.
Did I say that?
In 5 years, I think that you have.
Okay.
But this is a small figure. At first, I thought it was an eraser. The first time I was given it.
Not a great eraser.
No, it doesn't. Well, it is. Wait now. Wait, Joe. Wait. Back it up, Terry. Wait. It is. It is a great eraser. But not of pencils.
Well, tell the people what it is.
The people, it is, when it was given to, we had a gentleman here who attended not too long ago. I think he's still part of our congregation, but he was giving out these, it's called Little Jesus. It's a miniature, what, someone thinks Jesus looks like. And it's just a miniature figure of Little Jesus. And
it's like an idol, kind of.
Well, no, not really an idol. It's see now you're putting words, trying to put words in my mouth.
I'm just messing with you.
No, see,
it's a little Jesus.
You're stealing his peace about his Jesus.
Yes,
I am. I'm causing anxiety.
But the guy who was giving these out, he was giving them to younger kids, and he was like, "Hey," and it was twofold. Here's a little Jesus. literally a little Jesus, but also as a reminder, here's, don't forget Jesus in your life. But I thought this lady had mine at first. I have a coworker who's going through a challenging time right now. It's another episode, but literally, and I just told her, that we are trying to help her, all those things. But I said, everywhere in the New Testament before Jesus helped people, he always taught them. And she just started smiling. She reached into her pocket and she pulled out the exact same.
Somebody gave her a little Jesus.
Really?
Right.
Exactly. And
when your faith grows, can you trade it in for a bigger Jesus?
They should, if you submerge that one, if you were to baptize this Jesus, he should grow.
Oh, yeah. Well, see, now y'all are just running out here with it too much. Now I'm discombobulated. But at first, when she pulled it out of her pocket, I almost went, "Hey, wait a minute. Where'd you get that?"
You thought you was about to take it back from
I was
her,
going
wasn't
to
you?
give me that back. I know you're going through a hard time. I need that back.
Don't be stealing my Jesus.
But anyway, she started talking and she told me who gave her that. And I'm like, okay. I kind of backed off at that point. I'm like, okay, you can keep it. But it's a peace. Jesus does provide peace, of course. And I just happened to. This has been over our door facing at home for some reason. One of my kids did not want to throw it away, so I just stuck it up there and I grabbed it this morning. But when I was in high school, our Fellowship of Christian Athletes, I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't grow up in going to any type of religious body, any building, anything. But I knew God was God, and God created me and my family and everything. But when I was in high school, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, they went around. We had a lot of success in the little football program I was a part of, and they put little footballs. It was playoff time. We'd won a few playoff games, and they kept feeding us. Somebody did, parents. But anyway, the FCA, they kept putting this little football in my locker that somebody had written, Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ. And I was 16, 17 years old. I didn't know anything about Christ, but I held on to that little football paper, it's the shape of a football, for years and years. And it's about soul training, not about me, but that little phrase, Philippians 4:13, didn't know anything about Christ, but I knew Christ had something to do with religion. But just that little phrase, just knowing that was my little Jesus at that time. Just knowing a little about Jesus got me through decades.
Well, maybe one day you'll be able to give your little Jesus to somebody else.
You never know, Joe. I just keep it up, and I might give it to you.
You got to put it in my ear, okay? Back to Philippians. So where were we? Have we gotten to the verse? Have we done verse 7?
We did verse 7, and we were talking about prayer and the role that it has, and we hadn't yet mentioned that in verse 6. It mentions with thanksgiving. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. Let your requests be made known to God. Why is it so important to make our requests known along with thanksgiving? And the reason I believe that's important is that when we lose sight of what God is doing, then we grow resentful of what God isn't doing. So we're so focused on what He's not doing, what we want Him to do, and He hasn't done for us yet, or why is He not doing this? When's He going to do it? We can lose sight of all the things that He currently is doing, has done for us. And thanksgiving reminds us of what He has done.
I was just going to ask, obviously with peace, I'm asking you all this to generate discussion, but also maybe something our listeners, almost said readers, our listeners can connect with.
Our dear listeners.
Our dear listeners can connect with. But peace, what takes our peace? I mean, we're all born, we come home from the hospital more than likely, unless you're born at home or somewhere. But we begin to grow and develop, and most of us, I drive a bus, and I pick up little kids in the morning, and I drop them off in the afternoon. And 99% of those little kids from kindergarten through the 5th grade are happy. They're just happy. They are happy, and some of these kids have physical blessings or material blessings. Some of them don't. but they're both equally as happy. But when it seems like when I roll around to the middle school bunch and the high schoolers, it's just like stoic all day long, and so I'm just thinking about us. Where did our peace go? Where did it go? We know Genesis 3 tells us we're in a fallen world. 1 Peter 5:8 tells us that Satan is roaring around, seeking to devour us as a lion, is the metaphor. But
sorry,
that's okay, Joe. But where did our peace go? I mean, I don't have an answer. I mean, I kind of have a lot of answers, and you've touched on mental health and some other things and society and everything, but where did our peace go?
I don't know. Now, when you're talking about like kids, I think some of that has to do with child development, and there's kind of a natural, I don't think any person that's developing in a normal way retains the same sheer joy that a toddler does all the way up to adulthood. There's the cycles that you go through, and there's all science and study behind all of that. But nevertheless, your point remains that there are things in this world that are stealing our peace, that are stealing our joy, things that. And largely, I think it's things that are distracting us from the things that truly matter.
That was the big thing.
Kind of like when Jesus was walking on the water in the storm, right? And Peter says, well, if it is you, call me to come out to you, which I don't. Sometimes I don't understand Peter, because I can't imagine that in 100 years it would have occurred to me to say, Jesus, if that's you, call me out to you.
Yeah, it seems like you said, come get in the boat.
I don't know. But anyway, he does. That's what he says.
Run
call
over
me
here.
out to me. And Jesus says, come on. And so Peter does get out of the boat and begins to walk on water, which, as far as I know, only the one or two people ever to walk on water. Which is pretty incredible.
Second longest water walk in history.
Exactly, yeah. But they say second place is the first loser, right?
That's true.
But anyway, so he's walking on water, and he's doing great as long as his eyes are on Jesus, but then he gets distracted by the waves around him, and here's this big storm, and what am I doing? People can't do this, and he sinks when his focus is off of Jesus. And I think that happens to us all the time. When our focus gets off of Jesus, Peter's fantastic. He's an apostle. He's a man of faith. He's a leader in the church. Nobody is immune to this.
He still loses focus.
Any of us, we can lose our focus, and when we lose our focus, when we take our eyes off of Jesus, we'll begin to sink in this world.
I think you're right, and I think Solomon, writing Ecclesiastes, the things that he looked for there with... if you read Ecclesiastes, pretty much everything. I'll spoil the book for you. It's all vanity.
Right.
And so...
well, it's not a spoiler. That's in the first verse.
If you hadn't read it by now, you should totally have read it. But if he's seeking out pleasure, that's vanity. Well, good grief. As Americans, look around. What are most of us seeking out? We're seeking out pleasure. We're seeking out money. We're seeking out, work, wisdom, all of those things that are so dearly held in our culture. I know we're a global podcast, but in our culture here in the U.S., those things lead to nothing, essentially.
And as I listen to you talk, and my heart breaks. We always said we try not to date what we're doing, because early on Daniel said we need to be evergreen, but as we are recording this cold day in southern Kentucky, that we are...
we're not going to say the date, but we're going to pretty much tell you the date.
I think you've referenced that and then disregarded it in the last three episodes in a row.
That's what he does. He references the rule and then proceeds just to bust on through it.
Just to break it, But with this, are we week 2 of the fires in L.A. roughly, maybe? And
at least.
And I've of course, during the run of a day, I'll hit a couple different news outlets on my phone, and I'll just look at the blurbs or the headlines. But there are we would call famous, well-known actors and actresses who are like just lamenting about the loss of their property, and my heart breaks for them.
They're not above losing
Right.
everything either in a fire.
But my point is that it kind of takes us back to Solomon, that they're understanding what some of us have known. I had a house fire in 2007. I mean, we've all gone through challenges. But like I listened to, it's okay to drop his name. I mean, Mel Gibson, he talked about I'm sure he has multiple homes. I shouldn't assume that. But anyway, his home in L.A., he said that losing this home as he gets ready, I think, is he going to do another Passion of Christ?
He's working on a sequel. Yeah, the Resurrection.
I saw something the other day. His words, not mine. He said that losing a home has helped him with cleansing in preparation for this. So that tells me that even he is reminded. It's just like you get a reset, like we just get overloaded with all this.
It's temporary.
Yeah, it is.
These things are temporary.
It really is, and so.
Not to at all put him in the same class as Solomon, but a modern person who came up with a similar conclusion is, Jim Carrey, wildly successful and famous comedic actor. He once said, "I wish everyone could get rich and famous and have everything they ever dreamed of, so they can see that's not the answer."
Wow. Now, he's battled. I saw something that he's battled a lot of mental health. That's a whole nother thing, but anxiety and
if you've
OCD.
seen, I'm not to make light of it, but if you've seen anything he's ever been in, that shouldn't be terribly shocking.
Yeah.
Okay, on that note.
It was to me. I didn't know it was that, he battled.
Well, I think a lot of the best comedians have battled significant depression and things like that. Comedy is an outlet for masking that kind of thing.
So to wrap this show up, we've got just a couple of minutes. Unless you have something else that you feel is pressing, Daniel, you're looking. You guys should see Daniel. He's got like the dashboard of the Starship Enterprise in front of him right here. He's got multiple computers.
He's got 3 devices out.
Okay. So looks can be deceiving. I've got my phone here. It just has my timer on it to help, pace what we're doing here. It looks like I don't have 2 computers. I have one computer and I have an external monitor because the monitor on my laptop is broken and doesn't work, and it's cheaper to buy an external monitor than to repair the laptop.
You can say what you want, but I'm recording this on one device. Daniel has more devices than I do, and I'm doing all the tech stuff.
Hey, I've got a notebook and a pen.
Little Jesus.
That's right.
So let's sum this up in just a couple of sentences. So first of all, what is the peace that surpasses understanding?
I think the peace, we talk about peace, you're talking about a cessation of striving. You're kind of at one with, you're at peace with your life, with your relationships, and it's not necessarily what you're going through. It almost reminds me of creation. On day 7, God was at peace with his creation. I think that's what it meant by he was resting. It was not so much that he was tired from his week of creation. It was he was at peace with it. He was at rest with it. All was right. Yeah, it was whole. Maybe whole is a good way to think about this peace.
I like that phrase you use, cessation of striving. That we're not being complacent and we're not saying we don't want a standard of living. But
the struggle on those things is eased.
Yeah.
We're able to pump the brakes.
Right. And so when you're able to have that calm and completeness in a situation that doesn't make sense to the world that you would, when somebody outside looking in says, how can you be at peace? Or maybe you don't even understand, how you can be at peace in that situation. It's just because the Bible says to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. As long as you're leaning on your own understanding, you can't have the peace that passes understanding.
And we have a friend of the show that's been a former guest, and he's mentioned before, I won't call him out, but he's mentioned before that they had a child that had a very grim prognosis very early in life. And they were not expecting this child to make it. And our buddy was calm about it, and the doctors could not figure out, why are you not losing your mind? And he didn't really have an answer for them other than he had that peace. at that moment. So, okay, so that's the peace. The second should be a short answer because you've kind of touched on it. How do you go about getting that peace?
Trust God.
There you go. Okay. Well, then that's our time. Anything else? I'll take that as a no. Daniel, send us home.
All right. Well, thank you, dear listener, for joining us for this episode and letting us be a part of your spiritual diet. We'd love to hear from you. Send us an email and let us know your thoughts on this topic or requests for other topics you'd like for us to consider. We want to thank the elders at the South Green Street Church of Christ for making soul training possible. We want to thank our new friends at the Light Network, and want to refer you to that fine family of podcasts for other things that you might could listen to as well, because we only come out once every 2 weeks, and so you want to listen to other stuff too. Of course, make sure you're checking out Soul Training every 2 weeks. But with that in mind, on behalf of Alan and Joe, I'm Daniel. Until next time, keep soul training.
Soul training. Time to practice what you preach. Ooh, yeah. Yes, we do. We've got soul training.
To learn more, you can email us at soultrainingpodcast@gmail.com, or you can write to us, P.O. Box 503, Glasgow, Kentucky, 42142. That's Soul Training.